Right now, as you listen to this, there's something watching you from space. It's been there your entire life, hovering in the sky with perfect precision, never revealing its far side, never deviating from its path. You've been told it's just a natural satellite, a cosmic accident that happened to end up in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. But what if I told you that some of the world's most respected scientists, astronauts who've walked on its surface, and even government insiders have questioned whether that story is true? What if the moon isn't what you think it is? What if it was never meant to be there at all? Or worse, what if it was placed there intentionally and someone has been keeping that secret for decades? By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why so many researchers believe we've been living under the greatest cover-up in human history, and why the evidence hiding in plain sight might change everything you thought you knew about our place in the universe.
The moon has been humanity's constant companion throughout history, inspiring poets, guiding travelers, and marking the passage of time for civilizations across the globe. We've grown so accustomed to its presence that we rarely stop to question whether it should be there at all. But when you start examining the actual evidence, when you look past the comfortable explanations we've been given, a disturbing pattern emerges. The moon is too perfect, too precisely placed, and too fundamentally strange to be explained by chance alone. This isn't just about conspiracy theories or fringe speculation. We're talking about documented anomalies, official data that doesn't add up, testimony from people who were actually there, and a mounting pile of evidence that suggests something far more extraordinary than a simple collision billions of years ago. What we're about to explore goes beyond questioning the moon's origin. We're investigating the possibility that everything we've been taught about our closest celestial neighbor might be part of a carefully constructed narrative designed to hide a truth that could fundamentally alter our understanding of human history and our place in the cosmos.
Let's start with something that should immediately strike you as unusual. The moon perfectly covers the sun during a total solar eclipse. Think about that for a moment. The sun is approximately 400 times larger than the moon, but it also happens to be approximately 400 times farther away from Earth. This creates a mathematical precision that allows the moon to block out the sun's disk completely, leaving only the glowing corona visible during totality. This phenomenon doesn't occur anywhere else in our solar system. No other planet has a moon capable of creating such perfect total eclipses. It's an alignment so precise that mainstream scientists themselves acknowledge how remarkable it is, even as they insist it's merely coincidence. The standard explanation is that we just happen to live during the brief window of history when this alignment exists. Scientists tell us the moon is gradually drifting away from Earth, and millions of years from now, total eclipses won't be possible anymore. According to this view, we're extraordinarily lucky to be alive during the exact era when the moon and sun appear identical in size from Earth's surface. But here's where that explanation starts to feel inadequate. If the moon's position and size relative to the sun were truly random, the odds of this perfect alignment occurring during the precise period when intelligent life evolved to witness it become astronomically small. We're not just talking about the moon being roughly the same apparent size as the sun. We're talking about a precision alignment that allows for the spectacular phenomenon of total eclipses, complete with the corona effect that has mesmerized humans throughout history. Consider the broader implications of this arrangement. The moon doesn't just create beautiful eclipses. Its gravitational influence controls Earth's tides, which in turn shaped the development of coastal ecosystems that many scientists believe were crucial for the emergence of complex life. The moon also stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, preventing the kind of wild climate swings that would make the development of advanced civilization nearly impossible. Without the moon's stabilizing presence, our planet would wobble chaotically, leading to extreme seasonal variations that could have prevented life as we know it from ever taking hold. The fact that the moon performs all these functions while also creating perfect eclipses and maintaining a nearly circular orbit starts to look less like a series of fortunate accidents and more like a carefully designed system. The giant impact hypothesis, which is currently the most widely accepted explanation for the moon's formation, suggests that a Mars-sized object collided with Earth billions of years ago, and the debris from this collision eventually coalesced into the moon. While this theory has gained widespread acceptance, it has significant problems that even mainstream scientists acknowledge. One of the most troubling issues is that the moon's composition is almost identical to Earth's outer layers. If the moon formed from a collision between Earth and another planetary body, we would expect to see a mixture of materials from both objects. Instead, the moon's rocks show isotopic signatures that are remarkably similar to Earth's crust, with very little evidence of the foreign impactor that supposedly created it. This compositional similarity has led some researchers to question whether the impact hypothesis can fully explain what we observe.
Now let's discuss something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually based on documented scientific observations. During the Apollo missions, NASA conducted experiments that produced results so unusual they fueled decades of speculation about the moon's internal structure. When the Apollo 12 lunar module was deliberately crashed into the moon's surface, seismic sensors that had been left behind recorded something completely unexpected. The moon didn't just shake briefly like you'd expect from an impact, it vibrated for over an hour, resonating in a way that one NASA scientist described as ringing like a bell. This same phenomenon occurred again when Apollo 13's third stage impacted the moon with even greater force, producing vibrations that lasted for hours. To understand why this is so significant, you need to know that this isn't how solid celestial bodies typically behave. When you strike Earth, the vibrations are quickly absorbed by our planet's molten interior and varied composition. Earthquakes produce sharp, relatively brief seismic events, but the moon's response to these impacts suggested something fundamentally different about its internal structure. The prolonged ringing indicated that shock waves were traveling through the moon's interior with very little dampening, bouncing around in ways that solid rock shouldn't allow. Mainstream scientists explained this by suggesting the moon's interior is exceptionally dry and rigid, lacking the water and varied materials that would normally absorb vibrations. They pointed to the moon's fractured outer shell and different composition as reasons why seismic waves might propagate differently than on Earth. But this explanation didn't satisfy everyone, particularly when you consider what hollow or partially hollow would mean for our understanding of the moon's formation. Natural celestial bodies form under intense gravitational pressure that compacts materials toward the center, creating dense cores. A hollow moon would contradict everything we understand about natural planetary formation. The laws of physics that govern how objects form in space simply don't produce hollow spheres of this size through natural processes. If the moon is indeed hollow or contains large internal voids, it raises profound questions about how it came to exist. This is where the theory proposed by Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov becomes relevant. In 1970, these respected members of the USSR Academy of Sciences published a paper asking whether the moon could be the creation of an intelligence. They weren't fringe conspiracy theorists, they were legitimate scientists working within the Soviet space program, and they were willing to seriously consider the possibility that the moon might be an artificial construct.
Their hypothesis suggested the moon could be a massive ancient spacecraft or observation post, essentially a hollowed-out planetoid placed in Earth's orbit by an unknown advanced civilization. While this theory was speculative and controversial, the fact that it was published in a respected Soviet journal and taken seriously enough to generate academic discussion tells us something important. Even within the scientific establishment, there have been voices willing to acknowledge that the moon's characteristics don't fit neatly into our standard models of celestial mechanics. The seismic data we have from the Apollo missions remains incomplete and somewhat mysterious. We've never conducted deep drilling on the moon or deployed the kind of advanced seismic equipment that would be needed to fully map its interior structure. Much of what lies beneath the lunar surface remains unknown, and that uncertainty leaves room for alternative interpretations of the limited data we do possess. The Moon's density also raises questions. It's significantly less dense than Earth, which some researchers argue could indicate the presence of large internal chambers or voids. While mainstream science attributes this lower density to differences in composition, with the Moon having a smaller iron core relative to its size, believers in the artificial moon theory see it as potential evidence of hollow spaces within. They argue that if an advanced civilization wanted to create a structure that could withstand the harsh environment of space for millions or billions of years, building it with a hollow interior would actually make engineering sense. It would reduce the overall mass while maintaining structural integrity, and it would provide space for whatever systems or purposes the structure was designed to serve.
One of the most compelling aspects of the moon mystery comes not from science, but from history. Cultures separated by vast distances and thousands of years, peoples who had no contact with each other and no way to share stories, all preserved remarkably similar traditions about a time before the moon existed in Earth's sky. These aren't vague myths or symbolic tales. They're specific accounts describing an era when the heavens looked fundamentally different, when the night sky lacked the bright companion we take for granted today. The Zulu people of South Africa maintained oral traditions speaking of a time before the moon. In their stories, two brothers named Wawane and Mpanku stole the moon and brought it into the sky. What makes this account particularly intriguing is its mechanical, almost technological description. The Zulu tales describe the moon as originally being a giant egg that was hollowed out and rolled into position. This isn't the kind of poetic metaphor you'd expect from a creation myth. It sounds more like a description of an actual engineering project, passed down through generations until the details became wrapped in legendary language. Ancient Greek sources also contained references to pre-lunar humanity. The historian Apollonius of Rhodes wrote about the Pro-Selenes, which literally translates to those who existed before the moon. Aristotle acknowledged these legends in his writings, referencing people who claimed to have ancestral memories of a moonless sky. Plutarch and Lucian both documented traditions of the Arcadians, describing them as an ancient people who lived when the moon was not yet visible from Earth. These weren't obscure texts or fringe documents. They were part of the accepted historical and philosophical literature of classical Greece, treated as legitimate accounts worthy of scholarly attention. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in pre-Columbian America, similar themes emerged from cultures that had absolutely no contact with Mediterranean civilizations. The Tiwanaku culture of South America possessed myths describing an era when the moon had not yet appeared in the heavens. The ancient Colombians of the Bogotá Highlands told stories in which the moon manifested after a great flood, implying a major celestial change within their cultural memory. The fact that these narratives appear in societies separated by oceans and continents, developing independently over thousands of years, challenges the easy dismissal that these are merely symbolic stories about the beginning of time or the measurement of months. Mainstream historians and anthropologists typically interpret these accounts metaphorically. To them, before the moon might simply mean before civilization as we know it, or before time was formally measured. They view the moon as a symbol representing various cultural transitions rather than a literal description of astronomical reality. But this interpretation requires us to believe that dozens of unconnected cultures all independently chose the same symbolic framework, all decided to mark important transitions by imagining a time before the moon existed, despite the moon being such a constant and obvious feature of the night sky. The statistical improbability of this coincidental symbolism gives pause to those willing to consider alternative explanations. What makes these ancient accounts even more significant is that they often include surprisingly accurate astronomical knowledge. Many ancient cultures built sophisticated calendars, tracked planetary movements with remarkable precision, and understood eclipses well enough to predict them. These weren't ignorant primitives making up stories about lights in the sky. They were careful observers of celestial phenomena who understood the heavens far better than we often give them credit for. When people with this level of astronomical sophistication describe a fundamental change in the night sky, when they specifically identify the moon as something that arrived rather than something that had always been there, perhaps we should take their accounts more seriously than academic convention typically allows. The emergence of agricultural civilization around 10,000 years ago presents another intriguing correlation. Humanity transitioned relatively suddenly from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled agricultural communities, developing complex societies, written language, and sophisticated understanding of seasonal cycles. Some researchers wonder whether the moon's presence, providing regular cycles and stable illumination, played a role in enabling this transition. If the moon had been introduced or repositioned during this period, it would have represented such a dramatic change in the night sky that cultures worldwide would have preserved memories of it, exactly as we see in these ancient traditions.
The moon's orbit presents another series of anomalies that become increasingly difficult to explain through natural processes alone. Let's start with tidal locking, the phenomenon that causes the moon to always show the same face toward Earth. While this can be explained through gravitational interactions over millions of years, the result is still remarkable. Out of all the possible rotational states the moon could occupy, it rotates at precisely the speed needed to keep one hemisphere eternally facing our planet. We never see the far side from Earth's surface, and this permanent orientation has existed throughout human history. Now consider the moon's orbital path. Most natural orbits are elliptical, meaning the orbiting body moves closer to and farther from the object it circles. Planets orbit the sun in stretched ovals. Most moons follow similar elliptical patterns around their planets, but Earth's moon maintains one of the most circular orbits of any natural satellite in the solar system. It's not perfectly circular, but it's remarkably close, maintaining a nearly constant distance from Earth as it completes each orbit. This circular stability creates predictable gravitational effects, consistent tides, and regular patterns that have shaped life on our planet. The precision of this arrangement raises eyebrows among those questioning whether such perfection could arise from chaotic cosmic events. The moon's stabilizing effect on Earth's rotation is well documented and accepted by mainstream science. Without the moon, Earth's axial tilt would vary dramatically over time, potentially swinging from nearly 0 degrees to extreme angles. This would create climate chaos, with the poles sometimes pointing almost directly at the sun and other times remaining in perpetual darkness. Such wild variations would make the development of complex ecosystems extremely difficult and the rise of technological civilization nearly impossible. The climate stability we've enjoyed throughout human history exists largely because the moon keeps Earth's rotational axis steady. This stabilization isn't minor or incidental, it's fundamental to Earth's habitability, and it requires a moon of precisely the right mass at precisely the right distance in precisely the right orbit.
Here's where believers in intentional placement find their strongest argument. If you wanted to make a planet suitable for complex life, if you were engineering an environment where civilization could develop, you would need exactly this kind of stabilizing mechanism. The moon performs this function so perfectly, maintaining such precise orbital parameters, that calling it coincidence starts to feel inadequate. Every aspect of the moon's relationship with Earth seems optimized for creating stable, life-friendly conditions. The circular orbit prevents dramatic variations in tidal forces. The tidal locking provides consistent gravitational interaction. The size and distance create perfect eclipses while also generating sufficient gravitational pull to stabilize Earth's axis without being so strong that it disrupts our rotation or creates destructive tidal forces. The moon is also drifting slowly away from Earth, receding at a rate of approximately 3.8 centimeters per year. This has been precisely measured using laser reflectors left on the lunar surface by Apollo astronauts. Scientists explain this drift as a natural consequence of tidal friction, with Earth's rotational energy being gradually transferred to the Moon's orbit. But the consistency of this recession rate is noteworthy. It's not erratic or unpredictable. It follows a steady, almost programmed pattern, as if the Moon's trajectory was calculated in advance to account for this gradual separation. Some researchers wonder whether this drift represents a slow-motion departure, with the Moon eventually destined to leave Earth's orbit entirely, its stabilizing mission complete. The timing of our existence adds another layer to this mystery. We happen to live during the precise era when the Moon is the perfect size and distance to create total solar eclipses. We happen to exist when its stabilizing influence maintains climate conditions suitable for technological civilization. We happen to be here when the Moon's gravitational effects are optimized for life on Earth. According to mainstream science, this is simply remarkable luck, an accident of timing that places humanity at exactly the right moment in cosmic history. But when you stack coincidence upon coincidence, when you see pattern after pattern of precise optimization, the explanation of blind chance begins to strain audibility.
The materials found on the Moon tell a story that doesn't quite fit with our standard models of solar system formation. Lunar samples collected during the Apollo missions revealed chemical compositions and elemental distributions that continue to puzzle scientists decades after they were brought back to Earth. Let's examine what makes the Moon's makeup so unusual and why these anomalies fuel speculation about artificial origins. Titanium concentrations on the Moon are surprisingly high, particularly in certain regions like Mare Tranquillitatis, where Apollo 11 landed. Lunar rocks contain titanium at levels far exceeding what we typically find on Earth. On our planet, titanium is a rare and valuable metal, prized for its exceptional strength-to-weight ratio and corrosion resistance. We use it in aerospace applications, spacecraft construction, and anywhere that demands materials capable of withstanding extreme conditions. Yet on the Moon, titanium appears in abundance, concentrated in ways that volcanic activity alone struggles to fully explain. For those questioning the Moon's natural origin, this raises an intriguing possibility. If you were constructing an artificial structure designed to endure in the harsh environment of space for millions or billions of years, titanium would be among your first choices for building material. Its resistance to temperature extremes, radiation, and chemical degradation would make it ideal for creating a durable outer shell. Even more puzzling are the unusual radioactive isotopes found in lunar samples. Apollo missions reportedly detected trace amounts of uranium-236 and neptunium-237 in moon rocks. These elements are extremely rare in nature and don't occur in significant quantities anywhere on Earth except as byproducts of artificial nuclear reactions. Uranium-236 is typically created in nuclear reactors or weapons testing. Neptunium-237 must be synthesized in laboratories or produced inside nuclear reactors. Their presence on the Moon, even in trace amounts, is difficult to explain through natural processes. Skeptics argue these readings might result from contamination during sample collection or analysis, which is certainly possible given the technology available during the Apollo era. But believers see these isotopes as potential evidence of ancient technology, perhaps remnants of power systems or the residue of processes we don't yet understand. The lunar surface is covered in countless tiny glass beads, spherical particles created by intense heat, presumably from meteor impacts melting the regolith. While mainstream science accepts this explanation for their formation, the sheer quantity of these glass beads and their remarkably even distribution across the Moon's surface strikes some researchers as unusual. Glass formation requires specific high-energy conditions, and while meteor impact certainly provides such conditions, the uniformity of these particles suggests something more systematic might have occurred. Could some of this glass have resulted from artificial processes, perhaps deliberate melting of lunar soil for construction purposes or as a byproduct of energy systems? The question remains open because we simply don't have enough data to definitively explain every aspect of the Moon's surface composition. Some lunar rocks display slight magnetization, which presents another mystery. The moon doesn't have a global magnetic field like Earth does, so how did these rocks acquire magnetic properties? The mainstream explanation suggests the moon might have possessed a magnetic field billions of years ago that subsequently died out, with some rocks retaining residual magnetization from that ancient field. But this theory has problems. For the moon to have generated a strong magnetic field, it would need a liquid metallic core of significant size, something that doesn't match well with our understanding of the moon's internal structure. Alternative explanations suggest the magnetization could result from meteor impacts generating temporary magnetic fields, or from external magnetic influences during the moon's formation. Yet some researchers wonder whether the magnetic signatures might indicate something else entirely, perhaps embedded materials or technological remnants that we haven't yet identified.
The official space programs of both the United States and Soviet Union contain curious gaps, missing data, and unexplained incidents that fuel ongoing speculation about what was really discovered during humanity's first visits to the lunar surface. These aren't baseless conspiracy theories. They're questions raised by documented facts, missing footage, and testimony from people who worked within the space programs themselves. Start with the fact that original video footage from Apollo 11, the most historic moment in space exploration, was lost. NASA later admitted that the highest quality slow-scan television recordings were accidentally recorded over during a period when videotape was expensive and reuse was common practice. While this explanation might seem plausible from a bureaucratic standpoint, many find it difficult to believe that footage of such monumental historical importance could be treated so carelessly. These weren't copies or duplicates, they were the original master recordings, containing image quality far superior to what was broadcast live to television audiences. The fact that no one thought to preserve them, that they were allowed to be erased during routine tape recycling, strikes many as either remarkably incompetent or deliberately convenient for those who might not want certain details examined too closely. During Apollo 17, the final manned mission to the moon, there was a 4-minute communication gap between the astronauts and mission control in Houston. The official explanation describes it as a technical glitch, a temporary failure in the communication systems that was quickly resolved. But audio recordings from the mission, released decades later, include moments where astronauts sound surprised or uncertain about things they're observing. The Apollo 10 crew reported hearing strange sounds while orbiting the far side of the moon, describing it as a kind of whistling, or what they called outer space music. NASA eventually attributed these sounds to radio interference between spacecraft systems, but even the astronauts at the time seemed genuinely puzzled and somewhat unsettled by what they were hearing. Why would experienced test pilots and astronauts, men selected precisely for their calm under pressure and rational approach to unexpected phenomena, react with such evident surprise to routine radio interference?
Then there's the testimony of individuals who worked within or adjacent to NASA's operations. Carl Wolf, a former United States Air Force technician, publicly claimed that in the 1960s he was shown photographs of the moon's far side that revealed artificial structures. According to Wolf, these images depicted buildings, towers, and dome-like formations that couldn't be explained as natural geological features. He described being told by a nervous colleague that they had found a base on the back side of the moon. Wolf maintained this story consistently from when he first went public in the late 1990s until his death in 2018, never wavering despite criticism and skepticism. Was he telling the truth, mistaken about what he saw, or fabricating the entire account? Without the photographs he described, which have never surfaced publicly, we cannot know with certainty. But his consistency and apparent sincerity have kept his testimony alive in discussions about lunar anomalies. Donna Hare, who worked as a contractor in NASA photo laboratories, made similar claims about image manipulation. She alleged that she witnessed photographs being airbrushed to remove unidentified objects from images before their public release, and that a culture of secrecy and intimidation surrounded anything that didn't fit the official narrative. Ken Johnston, another former NASA contractor, claimed he was instructed to destroy certain Apollo mission photographs, but kept some of them instead. He says these images showed anomalies on the lunar surface that appeared artificial, though again, the specific evidence he describes has never been independently verified. The pattern here isn't any single smoking gun piece of evidence. It's the accumulation of similar accounts from multiple individuals who worked in different capacities within the space program, all describing a system where unusual findings were suppressed or sanitized before reaching the public.
If we accept even the possibility that the moon was intentionally placed in Earth's orbit, the next logical question becomes why? What purpose would such an enormous undertaking serve? One compelling answer emerges from examining the moon's unique position and capabilities. From a strategic standpoint, the moon represents the perfect observation platform for monitoring everything happening on our planet. Its tidal locking means one face constantly watches Earth, never turning away, never breaking its eternal gaze. This isn't speculation about capabilities, it's simple geometry and orbital mechanics. Consider what an observer on the moon could see. Weather patterns developing and moving across continents, ocean currents and tidal cycles, the growth and movement of vegetation through seasons, the lights of cities increasing over decades and centuries, atmospheric changes and environmental conditions. Any technological civilization on Earth would be completely visible from the lunar surface, their activities mapped and monitored without any possibility of hiding. If you wanted to study a planet's development, to watch how life evolves and civilizations rise, you could hardly design a better vantage point than the moon provides. The lunar mascons, short for mass concentrations, add an intriguing technical dimension to this hypothesis. These are areas of unusually high density beneath the moon's surface, discovered when spacecraft orbiting the moon experienced unexpected gravitational pulls that altered their trajectories. Mainstream science explains mascons as remnants of ancient asteroid impacts that compressed and densified the lunar crust. But their distribution and characteristics raise questions. Could these dense regions actually be technology buried deep underground? Believers suggest they might represent power systems, data storage facilities, or the operational cores of monitoring equipment, their mass creating the gravitational anomalies that revealed their existence. Strange electromagnetic signals detected near the moon over the years compound the mystery. Some of these readings don't match known natural sources and remain unexplained by conventional physics. Are they simply noise we haven't properly interpreted? Artifacts of our own detection equipment? Or could they represent actual transmissions or the operational signatures of systems we don't yet understand? Without more sophisticated monitoring and the ability to triangulate these signals precisely, we're left with tantalizing hints rather than definitive answers. The moon's apparent influence on human biology and behavior, while controversial within scientific circles, has been observed and documented across cultures for millennia. Emergency rooms report unusual patterns of activity during full moons. Police departments note correlations between lunar phases and certain types of incidents. Ancient civilizations structured their calendars around lunar cycles and attributed powerful influences to the moon's phases, believing it affected fertility, emotional states, and even mental stability. Modern science remains skeptical of most of these claims, attributing them to confirmation bias and the human tendency to find patterns in random events. But the persistence of these observations across such diverse cultures and time periods makes them difficult to dismiss entirely. If the moon was indeed placed as an observation platform, these biological effects might not be coincidental. Perhaps the moon transmits subtle frequencies or fields that we can't yet detect with our instruments, but that nonetheless influence living organisms. This isn't as far-fetched as it might initially sound. We already know that many animals, from sea turtles to migrating birds, sense and respond to Earth's magnetic field in ways we're only beginning to understand. If an advanced civilization wanted to subtly influence or regulate biological processes on Earth, utilizing the moon as a transmission platform would be remarkably efficient. The moon's constant presence, its regular cycles, and its gravitational effects on Earth's oceans all create rhythms that life has evolved around. Could there be additional influences embedded within those natural patterns?
Perhaps no aspect of the moon mystery generates more heated debate than claims about artificial structures on the lunar surface. Thousands of photographs taken by Apollo missions, Soviet probes, and modern orbiters have been analyzed by researchers looking for signs of non-natural formations. While mainstream science dismisses most of these claims as pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful patterns in random shapes, some anomalies resist easy explanation and continue to fuel speculation. The so-called shard represents one of the most frequently cited examples. Photographed during Apollo 10, this object appears as a tall, spire-like formation rising vertically from the moon's surface and casting an elongated shadow. Some researchers argue it's simply an unusual rock formation, perhaps a boulder balanced on a ridge or an optical illusion created by lighting angles, but others point to its apparent verticality and geometric regularity as evidence of something more deliberate. Natural rock formations on the moon, shaped only by impacts and thermal expansion, without the weathering effects of wind and water, tend toward irregular, fractured shapes. The shard's apparent straightness seems anomalous in this context. The Tower of Sinus Medii presents an even more dramatic example. Allegedly captured in NASA imagery, this object appears as a massive vertical column that some analysts estimate to be over a mile in height based on its shadow length and the angle of sunlight. Mainstream explanations suggest it's either a photographic artifact, perhaps a defect in the image sensor or a dust particle on the camera lens, or an unusual geological feature dramatically exaggerated by lighting conditions and image enhancement. But believers in artificial lunar structures point to the tower's scale and apparent geometry as evidence that something remarkable stands on the moon's surface, something that deserves investigation with higher resolution imaging and possibly on-site examination. The Castle anomaly, named for its cluster-like appearance in Apollo 10 photographs, seems to show objects suspended above the lunar surface rather than resting on it. Some interpretations describe it as resembling a floating or tethered structure, while skeptics see it as nothing more than image noise or processing artifacts. The challenge with analyzing these anomalies lies in the limitations of the original photographic equipment. Apollo-era cameras, while sophisticated for their time, couldn't match the resolution and dynamic range of modern imaging systems. This means we're often examining grainy, high-contrast images where subtle details are lost and optical illusions become more likely. Natural caves and lava tubes on the moon have been confirmed through modern satellite imaging, particularly by Japan's Kaguya orbiter and NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. In 2009, a deep cylindrical pit was discovered, measuring over 250 feet across and 300 feet deep. Scientists believe it may be an entrance to an extensive lava tube system, hollow channels formed billions of years ago by flowing molten rock. While these features are accepted as natural geological formations, some researchers wonder whether ancient occupants might have utilized them. After all, these tubes would provide natural protection from radiation, meteor impacts, and extreme temperature variations. If there were artificial installations on the moon, concealing them within existing geological features would be an obvious strategy. The far side of the moon, permanently hidden from Earth's view, has been extensively photographed by orbiting spacecraft, but remains less thoroughly explored than the near side. Access to high-resolution imagery of certain far-side regions has been somewhat limited, and some researchers claim to have identified gaps or inconsistencies in the publicly available datasets. Whether these gaps represent legitimate data losses, technical imaging problems, or deliberate withholding of sensitive imagery remains a matter of debate. What's undeniable is that the far side offers countless square miles of terrain that no human has visited, and that we've examined only through orbital photography. If artificial structures exist on the moon, the far side would be the logical place to conceal them. Beyond suspicious photographs and orbital anomalies, the actual physical samples returned from the moon contain their own mysteries. The rocks and soil brought back by Apollo missions have been analyzed in laboratories around the world for more than 50 years. Yet certain aspects of their composition continue to puzzle scientists and provide ammunition for those questioning the moon's purely natural origins. Some lunar rocks appear to be older than any rocks found on Earth. One sample, retrieved during Apollo 16, was dated at approximately 4.46 billion years old, making it potentially older than most models of the moon's formation predict. If the giant impact hypothesis is correct, and the moon formed from debris created when a Mars-sized object collided with the early Earth, then lunar rocks should be roughly the same age as Earth's oldest crustal materials. The existence of apparently older lunar samples creates a chronological problem that challenges our understanding of when and how the moon came into being. Mainstream explanations suggest that the moon's smaller size allowed it to cool and solidify more rapidly than Earth, potentially preserving very ancient crustal material that has long since been recycled on our more geologically active planet. But the dating of these samples and the interpretation of their ages involves enough uncertainty that the question remains open. Lunar dust itself possesses unusual characteristics that surprised the Apollo astronauts who encountered it directly. Unlike Earth dust, which tends to be rounded and smoothed by wind and water weathering, lunar dust is incredibly fine and sharp, almost like microscopic shards of glass. It clung to everything, worked its way into equipment seals, and even irritated the astronauts' respiratory systems when small amounts made their way into the lunar module. The dust's abrasive properties and electrostatic behavior suggested it had never been weathered or rounded by atmospheric processes. Some researchers speculate that lunar dust might contain compounds or materials formed under unusual conditions, possibly conditions that wouldn't occur naturally. The dust's persistence and its ability to damage equipment became one of the unexpected challenges of lunar exploration, and understanding its full composition and properties remains an ongoing area of study.
The slight magnetic properties detected in some moon rocks continue to puzzle scientists because they require explanation in the absence of a current lunar magnetic field. Various theories attempt to account for this magnetization. Perhaps the moon once possessed a dynamo-generated magnetic field that subsequently shut down. Perhaps strong transient magnetic fields were created during meteor impacts. Perhaps the rocks were magnetized by external influences during their formation. Each explanation has supporters and critics within the scientific community, and the true answer may involve some combination of these factors. But for those questioning whether the moon is entirely natural, these magnetic signatures raise the possibility of embedded materials or structures that might have created localized magnetic fields. The glass beads scattered across the lunar surface provide another intriguing data point. While high-energy impacts can certainly melt regolith and create glass, the quantity and distribution of these particles suggest extraordinarily extensive melting events. Some researchers have calculated that the amount of glass on the moon would require melting volumes of material that seem disproportionate to the number and size of visible impact craters. Could some of this glass have formed through processes other than impacts? The question remains speculative, but it adds to the overall picture of a moon that doesn't quite match what our models of natural satellite formation would predict.